In 1995, the US government did something that scientists said was pointless. They took 31 wolves and dropped them into Yellowstone National Park. Wolves had been gone from the park for 70 years. Ranchers were furious. Hunters were skeptical. Most scientists called it a nice gesture at best. Nobody expected what happened next. Within a few years, the rivers moved, not a little, physically, permanently moved, and 31 wolves were the only thing that changed. This is the story of the most important ecological experiment ever accidentally run on a living ecosystem, and what it tells us about how everything in the world actually works. Let's go back to 1926. That's the year the last wolf in Yellowstone was killed. It wasn't an accident, it was policy. The US government had a program called predator control. The idea was simple. Fewer predators means more deer and elk, which means more for hunters. It made complete sense on paper, so they got rid of the wolves, and for a while, it seemed to work. Elk populations exploded. By the 1960s, there were tens of thousands of elk grazing freely across the park. Hunters were happy. Park rangers were happy. Everyone was happy, except the park was slowly dying, and nobody could figure out why. Here's what nobody had calculated. Elk, with no predators, stopped being afraid. And when elk stopped being afraid, they stopped moving. They found the most comfortable spots in the park, the river valleys, the flat meadows, and they just stayed there for decades. They ate everything. Every young tree that tried to grow near a river, gone. Every shrub on a riverbank, gone. The willows disappeared. The aspens disappeared. The cottonwoods disappeared. Ecologists who visited the park in the 1980s described the riverbanks as dead zones, just dirt and water, no shade, no roots, nothing holding the soil together. And when the trees disappeared from the riverbanks, the soil started eroding. The roots that held the banks together were gone. Rivers got wider and shallower. The water got warmer because there was no shade. Cold water fish started dying. Songbirds disappeared because there were no trees to nest in. Beavers disappeared because there were no willows to build dams with. The whole ecosystem was quietly collapsing, not because of a disease, not because of climate change, not because of humans cutting down forests, because one animal was missing, one predator, one presence, gone for 70 years. And then in January 1995, a truck pulled up to a remote section of the park. Inside were 14 wolves captured in the mountains of Canada. They had been tranquilized, tagged, and transported across the border. Rangers opened the cages, and for the first time in 70 years, wolves were in Yellowstone. For the first few weeks, nothing seemed to happen. The wolves stayed in their acclimation pens, getting used to the sounds and smells of the park. Then the gates opened. The first thing they did was find each other. The second thing they did was hunt, and the elk did something they hadn't done in 70 years. They got scared. Not all of them died. Most of them just moved. They stopped lounging in the river valleys. They started avoiding the open meadows near water. They kept moving, kept watching, kept away from places where a wolf could corner them. And the moment the elk left the riverbanks, something started growing, slowly at first, almost invisibly, but it was the beginning of everything that came next. Within 2 years of the wolves returning, scientists noticed something strange. The riverbanks were getting greener, not because anyone planted anything, not because of rainfall, not because of any human intervention, just because the elk had moved away from the water. The willows came back first, then the aspens, then the cottonwoods along the banks. 6 years after the wolves returned, some areas had 5 times more willow growth than before. 5 times, from 31 wolves, and then the beavers came back, because now there were willows to build with. Beavers started building dams, and beaver dams do something remarkable. They slow the water down. They create ponds and wetlands. Those wetlands become habitat for otters, muskrats, and ducks. Species that hadn't been seen in that area for decades suddenly showed up. Then the songbirds returned, because now there were trees to nest in. Bald eagles came back. Ravens and magpies followed the wolf packs to feed on their kills. Bears got fatter, because now there were more berry bushes growing on the riverbanks. Bears also ate the elk calves that wolves left behind. So the bear population grew too. Now here's the part that made scientists stop and stare. The rivers themselves started to change. Not the water level, not the volume, the actual physical path of the river. Rivers that had been straight started to meander. Rivers that had been eroding started to stabilize. The channels got narrower and deeper. There was more shade over the water. The water got colder. Cold water fish came back. How is this possible? How do 31 wolves change the path of a river? The answer is a concept called a trophic cascade. Trophic means relating to food and feeding in an ecosystem. A cascade means one change triggers another, which triggers another, which triggers another, like dominoes. But the dominoes are entire species. The wolf is what ecologists call a keystone species. Pull out the keystone and the whole arch collapses. Put it back and everything holds. But here's what makes Yellowstone so remarkable as a story. The wolves didn't physically change the rivers. They didn't plant the trees. They didn't build the dams. They just existed. Their presence alone, the fear they created, reorganized how every other species behaved. The elk didn't need to be eaten to change. They just needed to know the wolves were there. The fear was enough. Scientists call this the landscape of fear. Certain areas became dangerous, others became safe, and that invisible map of fear restructured the entire physical landscape. Think about what that actually means. The wolves changed the geography of the park without touching it. They changed it through behavior, through perception, through fear. The physical world responded to something invisible. Now here's the question I want you to sit with. If one predator, 31 animals in a park of 3,500 square miles, can reorganize rivers, forests, and dozens of species just by existing, what does that say about presence? What does that say about the invisible effect every single thing has on everything around it? The wolves never held a meeting. They never made a plan. They never tried to fix the ecosystem. They just showed up and were fully, completely themselves. And the world reorganized itself around that. There's a version of this that applies to you. Every room you walk into changes when you enter it. Every conversation shifts when you show up. Every group you're part of is different because you're in it. Not because of what you say or do, just because you're there. You are someone's wolf. You are someone's keystone. The question isn't whether you're creating a cascade. You already are. The question is, what kind? Yellowstone didn't get better because someone fixed it. It got better because the right presence returned. 31 wolves, 3,500 square miles, rivers that move, all because something that belonged there came back. Subscribe if you want more stories like this, where one small thing turns out to change everything, because there are more of them than you think.